All right, good morning. So I would like to continue with the last lecture. So remember I was telling you guys sort of the evolutionary biologist take on the birds and the bees, and I still have sort of put down the outline where I was last time. I still talking about, or finished talking about what it is. We now know it's about independent assortment and recombination, as far as an evolutionary biologist is concerned. And I wanted to just go through a number of different ways in which sexual reproduction is achieved, and some of the details that are a little bit interesting and relevant. And I talked about isogamy and anisogamy, the fact that when you have separate sexes, in most cases, one of the sexes invests a lot more energy into offspring, and you have anisogous gametes of different sizes in these different sexes. And I also gave you clues to tell how to determine which is the female and which is the male in any species you come across. I talked about hermaphroditic versus separate sexes, or hermaphrodites being those species that have both sexes in one individual, sometimes at the same time, sometimes sequentially. And then I talked about some species are capable or incapable of asexual reproduction. This is what's truly cloning, where you don't have recombination, you do not have independent assortment occurring, right, in asexual species. And I did mention that there are some species that go through several generations of asexual reproduction, followed by maybe a generation or two of sexual reproduction. I did forget to mention one thing, and that is genetic versus environmental sex determination. Now we are familiar with, I think, genetic sex determination. In mammals, for instance, we have 22 autosomal chromosomes and one pair of what we call sex chromosomes. And you have these chromosomes that are different morphologies. You have a very large X chromosome, and you have a much smaller Y chromosome. And you know the story: XX individuals develop into females, and XY individuals develop into males. Turns out there's a gene on the Y chromosome that's the sex determining gene. If you have it, then you develop into a male. If you don't have it, you develop into a female. Now, there's a couple of interesting things which I won't go into too much detail. I would encourage you. There's a very good course taught by three professors in this department: Professors Rasmus Nielsen, who's Danish, Monty Slakin, and Doris Bachrog, who's Austrian. But Doris, in particular, studies evolution of sex chromosomes and sex determining systems. There's really pretty interesting stuff. One interesting thing that is that the Y chromosomes are really degenerate. They don't have many genes on them. So ancestrally, the X and the Y were the same chromosomes. That is to say that they had this full complement of genes. And over time, the Y is degenerated to just have a couple. To this point now, it just has a few dozen genes in mammals. But anyways, in most organisms, it's genetic. In our case, in mammals, the males are called the heterogametic sex. They form gametes of two sorts. Some gametes will have an X chromosome. Some gametes will have a Y chromosome. Okay? There's other species, such as in birds, where they have it's a genetic sex determination system again, but it's the females that are the heterogametic sex. Okay? And in those cases, you have chromosomes that they label differently. Remember, these are just labels. The individuals that have two of the same chromosome, those become males, and the heterogametic sex, those are the females. Okay? Species or groups that actually have this type of sex determining system of birds, or ZZZW, and butterflies also have this sort of system. Once again, the labels are arbitrary, right? It's just telling you or giving you a clue that it's the female is the heterogametic sex. You might be familiar with haplodiploid sex determining systems, also genetic. Species like bees and ants and wasps, males are haploid, whereas females develop from a fertilized egg, diploid. Once again, it depends on the genes, whether you have two copies of every chromosome or one copy, whether you become male or female. Just giving you examples of the variety of sex determining systems are out there. And as evolutionary biologists, each one of these sex determining mechanisms has interesting details about it. So for instance, I wish I could have time to talk about this in more detail, but for instance, in bees and wasps, ants, it turns out that in a particular nest, all the worker bees are sisters, one to the other. And because of this particular sex determining mechanism, they're much more highly related to one another than is normal for sisters to be related. Okay, so that actually has a lot to do, we think, with how they evolve socially. Now, in other species, for instance, yes? All right, I will try again. I keep lapsing. So I'll write bigger and better, I hope. So in turtles and crocodiles, they have what's called environmental sex determination. Okay? In particular, it's the temperature at which the eggs are incubated determines whether or not you have a female or male develop. One of the people I showed when I was showing you experimental evolution, I showed you pictures of Holly Whitman and Jim Bull. Jim Bull is the fellow who discovered that turtles have environmental sex determination, which is pretty cool, right? So he's one of these scientists that's really changed this field quite a lot. In any case, with turtles, males are low temperature, and females develop from high temperature, whereas in crocodiles, it's just the opposite. Okay? So one thing you might ask, and I remember asking him Jim Bull, this is one time when I was a graduate student, since he was my PhD advisor, is why in a cold year or a hot year do you not have all males and females? Isn't that like bad, right? And it turns out that that would be bad, but the nests are at a much more constant temperature than the ambient temperature of the air outside. So there's kind of a threshold temperature over which that you cross whether they become all males or females, but the nests are basically at that temperature. So it works out for them in the end. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about the variety. There's a lot of interest in the evolution of all these, the evolutionary consequences of choosing different types of sex determining mechanisms. But I want to make an observation now, and that is the cost of reproducing sexually. Okay? Now this is the observation. I'll just point out the observation. If you were to make a phylogenetic tree, and on the tips of that tree, of species, and on the tips of that tree, plot out where you had asexual versus sexual species, you'll find the following type of pattern. So we will talk about how to build evolutionary trees in a couple lectures from now. But this is a tree, evolutionary tree, showing the evolutionary or genealogical relationships of different species. Obviously, I just made this up, right, because I just wrote it on the board without referring to anything. But the idea here is that these two species are each other's closest relatives because they share a most recent common ancestor right here. Right? On an evolutionary tree, you might imagine humans might be here and chimps might be here because we're each other's closest relatives sharing a common ancestor that lived 5 to 7 million years ago. Right? But we will talk about how to build these trees. But one of the interesting things you can do with these trees is you can plot on the tips whether a species is sexual or asexual. I know I had to write a little bit small, I'm sorry, but what I'm showing here is S is for sexually reproduce, A is for asexually reproduce. And the general pattern people have observed is that if you were to go through this exercise and plot out whether the species at the tips reproduces sexually or asexually, this is the type of pattern you get. You find that asexual species are found in a sea of sexual species. Right? The closest relatives of these asexual species are sexual. There is one well-known counterexample to this. It's basically these, they're called Deloid rotifers. They live in ponds. They're very small. They are an exception to this rule. They are anciently asexual, and they're actually a real enigma. People would like to know why they've been able to persist as asexual for so long. But what this means, what this general pattern means, with the exception of Deloid rotifers, is that when you have an asexual species arise, it doesn't seem to last very long. Otherwise, you'd see big groups of species being asexual, right? In general, asexual species only arrive, you only see them at the tips, little twigs on the tree. A parthenogenic snake or a parthenogenic lizard surrounded by a bunch of sexually reproducing lizards or snakes. Okay? So for whatever reasons, when asexual species arise, when asexual reproduction arises, it does not persist for very long. So there must be some disadvantage to being reproducing asexually. And that despite the fact that reproducing sexually incurs a real cost. And people describe this cost of reproducing sexually as the twofold cost of sex. So what is the twofold cost of sex? So this is what we need to explain. Asexual species do not seem to do well over evolutionary time, and yet they should have a real advantage. And here's why they should have a real advantage. I want you to, once again, remember I'm a theoretician, I like to think about simple models. So let's think about an idealized species that's reproducing sexually, all right? And in this ideal species, each female is going to have 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. Just make it simple. So here's our female. Now this female, as all females know, if they're sexually reproducing, they have to scrounge about and find some male. The male produces a sperm, fertilizes her egg, and this female will then produce 2 offspring in this idealized case, 1 female and 1 male. Now, as you know, males don't reproduce. I mean, we don't have children, right? That's kind of obvious, but I'll make that statement even if it's obvious. All this male can do is fertilize another female, right? So this female over here, the daughter of this mom, she can actually have, she's going to look around, find some male to mate with, he happily contributes some sperm, fertilizes the egg, she reproduces and produces, now that's small, I'm sorry, 1 female and 1 male, right? But the point here is that this population, this idealized population, you're wasting a lot of reproductive effort essentially on males in terms of how rapidly you can actually expand this, how rapidly you have more and more grandkids and great-grandkids and so forth. Okay? That is a sexual species. So now let's contrast this with our idealized asexual species. Remember, let's say you're a parthenogenic snake, as an example, and all your offspring are daughters, right? So once again, we'll have 2 children, but in this case, both children are females. So here's our mom. She doesn't have to look around for a male. She just makes two kids, both of which are female. These 2 daughters of this mom don't have to find any males. They just go ahead and reproduce, producing 2 females, and so forth. I mean, I hope the pattern's obvious. The asexually reproducing species is going to, that if you can imagine a gene or a mutation that would cause you to become asexual, that mutation should spread through the population. That is to say, once again, if we imagine we're a population, you know how I like my populations just circles, and we have a bunch of sexual individuals in this population. If you can imagine a mutation that causes one of those individuals to reproduce asexually, that mutation should have an enormous fitness advantage because of the fact that that mutation should be making many, many more offspring that are all capable of producing more offspring that are asexually reproduced, right? So the idea is that when these mutations arise, they should have an immediate fitness advantage and they should spread through the population. Okay? So whenever you have asexual species, an asexual mutation occurs, a mutation causing asexual reproduction occurs, that should spread through the population very, very rapidly. Right? Once again, this is a thought experiment. We don't have to think about what specific genes might be responsible. We just know that these things do happen. Okay? So this conflicts with what I said right there, obviously, right? So I'm saying here, this pattern would say that these mutations seem to have a real fitness advantage. We should see them all over the tree of life. And yet the observation is that we don't see them over the entire tree of life. Right? So how do we explain that, that contradiction? Well, it must be the case that despite the fact that when these mutations initially arise, there must be some cost to reproducing asexually. And that's what I'm going to explain now. Now I'm going to go to the last portion of this lecture and talk about why we think sexual reproduction is such a great thing to do. Okay? And there's 2, I don't want to say competing, but complementary explanations. They're probably both, almost certainly both acting. Okay? One is called Fisher's model. We've heard of Fisher before because you guys know he's my hero. And his explanation is that sexual species adapt more rapidly. The idea being that the environment is constantly changing, and that somehow being sexual allows you to adapt to a new environment more rapidly. So let's make that a little bit more explicit. So what I'm going to show you is a very simplified version or explanation for what's going on here. And I'm going to think about a population not as a circle with a bunch of alleles in it, but rather as a bunch of chromosomes. So here is the chromosome from one individual, here's a chromosome from another. This is just a very abstract way of talking about it, but I think it will illustrate the point. Right? So we're going to imagine that there's different loci spread across these chromosomes, and if you are, I'll say star, that is a beneficial mutation. Right? So if you are an individual that has this chromosome, right, that's good. You have a higher fitness. It's beneficial. And we know what natural selection will do on average. It will increase the frequency of this mutation so that more and more of the individuals in the population have this mutation. That's all standard vanilla stuff that I told you earlier. Okay? But let's think about another locus. Let's say that there's another locus over here where you have a potential beneficial mutation occurring. These individuals are also quite good. That is to say, all by itself, natural selection, just considering that one locus, natural selection should spread or favor individuals that bear this chromosome over here. Okay? The best individuals would have both of these mutations. Okay? Now, let's do the thought experiment. What happens in an asexual species? Remember, with asexual species, there's no recombinations. There's no way of directly getting this mutation through recombination onto this chromosome or vice versa. No way of getting this mutation directly onto this chromosome. There's only one way of getting both mutations. That is to say, when the mutation, if you want to get both of these mutations together, the only way that can occur is you might have a chromosome with this mutation on it already, then this mutation has to land on the same chromosome. That's the only way in asexually reproducing species for a mutation, beneficial mutation, at 2 different loci to get on the same chromosome. You have to have an independent zap, so to speak, right? Independent mutation on that chromosome. So what people, also what happens is, without recombination, these 2 mutations fight it out in a population, so to speak. Natural selection says, yes, you're a good mutation, beneficial, and you're beneficial, but which one ultimately becomes fixed depends on, well, maybe this one's slightly better than this one, right? If this mutation is slightly better than this one, then this one will have a better chance of becoming fixed in the population than this one, right? So you have 2 beneficial mutations, and in the absence of recombination, one adverse thing that can happen is these 2 chromosomes fight it out, and you might lose one of the other of these beneficial mutations when the other one wins. What people note in general is that if you were to make a graph, here's time, and here's frequency. We'll label these mutation 1 and mutation 2. What you might find is maybe mutation 1 occurs first, and it starts to increase in frequency. And now if mutation 2 arises later, and let's say it's better, let's say this is where mutation 2 occurs, well, then this frequency can go down while this one starts to go up, right? Because natural selection says number 2 is a better mutation than number 1. So you often see this would be the consequence of me saying that these two mutations are fighting it out. Now, the way, when you think about it, I said the only way of getting both these mutations in the same chromosome is to have one of the chromosome, the second mutation land on the same chromosome, a chromosome that already bears the first mutation. That can happen, but it's more likely to occur when one of the mutations is at high frequency. So another possibility is you have chromosome 1, chromosomes bearing mutation 1, beneficial mutation 1, get to high frequency. Once this is a high frequency, then when the second mutation occurs, the second beneficial mutation occurs, it's more likely to actually land on a chromosome that's already has mutation 1 because there's so many of them around. Right? But what you see is a sequential adaptation, right? You see the sequential fixation of these mutations, and it's slow. Right? It's slow because you have to wait around for this mutation to get high frequency and then wait for the second mutation to land on the chromosome that already bears the first chromosome. Asexual species adapt more slowly because they find it hard to get these two beneficial mutations together. Let's contrast that with asexual species. All we have to do is have those two mutations on these different chromosomes find themselves in one individual, and then you can have a recombination event between them that put both of those mutations onto one chromosome. Boom, you've got both mutations on the same chromosome. You didn't have to have both mutations occur independently on the same chromosome. Right? They can occur on different chromosomes and later be brought together through recombination. So the mathematics says that, and I think the intuition, I hope, would show you that with recombination, you can construct chromosomes that have both the mutations, both the beneficial mutations, much more rapidly. And as a consequence, sexual species can fix these beneficial mutations, bring them together, and they can adapt to a changing environment more rapidly. That's Fisher's explanation. I hope that's clear. I mean, it's a hard concept to explain, and I've always kind of gone with these imaginary chromosomes. I hope that helps. If you have problems, certainly come to office hours. The other explanation is Muller's. And Muller's explanation is that sexual species purge deleterious mutations more rapidly. Okay, so back to our imaginary chromosomes. Yeah, I'm going to erase this. And I'm going to erase this. Okay. So I mentioned that the majority of mutations are deleterious. Okay? And so a deleterious mutation, instead of having a star, we're going to have a sad face. That's the clear thing you should do. So in a population where you have some chromosomes that don't bear this deleterious mutation and some that do, we all know what natural selection would do. Through purifying selection, natural selection will be removing these deleterious mutations from the population. I talked about mutation selection balance when we talked about purifying selection as well. These mutations are constantly being introduced into a population and being removed as well. Now let's imagine that, so this would be the worst chromosome. Here is a chromosome that's a very nice one, right? It has this nice beneficial mutation on it. And so what we have now is an ordering of the chromosomes. Individuals bearing this chromosome have the highest fitness. Individuals that bear neither the beneficial nor the deleterious mutation are okay, and these guys are the worst, right? But the bummer is that you can have a beautifully pristine, nice fit chromosome that has deleterious mutations land on it. That's a bummer, right? It's now not clear whether this chromosome that has this nice beneficial mutation is going to be the best to have the highest fitness. It really depends on how deleterious this mutation is, right? Is this such a bad mutation? Is it so deleterious that it outweighs the beneficial aspect of this beneficial mutation at this other locus, right? It really depends on the details. But the point is that in asexual species, you have this accumulation of deleterious mutations on this background that can contain good mutations, right? Beneficial mutations. And there's no way of getting rid of them, right? Short of also getting rid of the beneficial mutations as well. So asexual species in general do not purge these deleterious mutations as easily, and when they do purge them, they purge everything. They also purge any beneficial mutations that also have to be on that chromosome. Once again, contrast that with sexual species. Here, if we have a recombination event between a chromosome that doesn't contain this deleterious mutation, also doesn't contain the beneficial mutation, you can actually reconstruct chromosomes, one of which has the deleterious mutation, and one of which is deleterious mutation free and does have the beneficial mutation. So you can actually recombine away these deleterious mutations. So the mathematics says, and I hope the intuition says as well, that in sexually reproducing species, they can more easily purge deleterious mutations from the population. And just as an aside, going back to what I said about, I mentioned the Y chromosome as being sort of the gene desert. It's also filled with what are obviously deleterious mutations, or at least were deleterious mutations. And that's one of the reasons that the Y chromosome does not recombine over most of its length. So it has no ability, it cannot easily purge deleterious mutations like the rest of the chromosomes can. So there's actually good work that people like Doris Backfrog and others have done where they tested aspects of this Muller model, the efficacy which you can actually purge populations purge these deleterious mutations from the population. All right, so that is that. I told you what sex is from an evolutionary perspective. I gave you some idea of the variety of ways of reproducing, with the main one being sexual and asexual reproduction. I told you about the cost of sexually reproducing. That is to say, if you're asexual, if you're a mutation that causes asexual reproduction, those types of mutations are going to have a very strong fitness advantage because they're going to produce so many offspring that can also have high reproductive potential. And I gave you the evolutionary explanation. It's probably both a combination of Fisher and Muller's model. That is to say, you can more rapidly evolve in a changing environment, and you can more easily purge your genome of deleterious mutations. Okay? Now, I want to pause while I let the screen down. Are there any questions? Yes. I can't hear you. My hearing's good. This and then my hearing's not as what it used to be. So, yeah. So the details vary from species to species, and frankly, I'm not don't know the details. I can find out if any real examples of the mechanism are known. Yeah, actually, Doris would be the person to ask. I'll ask Doris the next time I see her. Yeah. So the question, by the way, was remembering that I'm a theoretician. What are the details when you have a species that's sexual? What types of mutations, what type of genetic changes can cause the species to become asexually reproducing? And frankly, I don't know the details of any one case. There's got to be some genetic details because these are heritable traits. So it's got to come down to genes for certain. But it may vary from species to species. I don't know if the same type of mechanisms are involved in